What's up, everybody? Welcome to We Have Cool Friends, the cool show where we interview our cool friends about the cool things they're doing. I'm Greg Miller, and this is my cool friend, Kevin Smith.
Look at your graphics.
You like that?
Last time I talked to you kids, you know, you had $1 and a dream. You're like, we're going to do this thing, man. And now there's like cool opening graphics and the shit where I'm looking at it going like, I don't have a team like they got over at Kind of Funny. Like, look at the infrastructure. The infrastructure alone is impressive, man. That's nuts.
Well, it's funny. You're back here for the first time in 5 years, obviously, and you were there right as we launched. And yeah, like, we announced we've moved to a real studio since you last met us. Then we've now announced our giant studio that's 5 times bigger, and we were all excited to move in this summer. And then a pandemic hit.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Thankfully, we have an art form that allows us to do it from home. Can you imagine like not being able to do this from home if you had to shut down? You guys have been active the whole time, correct?
Yeah, exactly. You know, you remember Kevin. He's the one's obviously in your ear right now, making the graphics happen. Of course, he was there for the podcast with you too back in the day, and like, yeah, he was a true saint of making sure that when we had to work from home, everything worked perfectly.
It is. It's a luxury that those of us in the oral arts, if you will, who make our monies with our mouths, can still do it while the rest of the world was like forced to not work. There were days where I felt kind of guilty where I'm like, well, I mean, I know, I understand it's horrible out there, but like, oddly enough, I could still continue doing what I do. Did you ever carry any of that COVID guilt?
Oh, 100%. You know what I mean? The fact that we were able so easily, I think, to flip and not miss a beat. And it's been that thing of, I was expecting, I don't know what you've seen, I'd be interested to know with your shows. Like, I was expecting numbers not to drop, but to see a thing of like people changing up their routine and not listening to as much content, when it's actually been the opposite, where so many people have hit us up of like, I need a sense of normal. I need a release.
That's the thing I didn't expect either. I thought most people would be like, look, most people I saw in my immediate world were spending a lot of time with their face in the news, rightfully so. Everyone's terrified and stuff. So I just assumed it was like that everywhere. But, you know, we launched that Kevin Smith Club like in the middle, in the beginning of the pandemic. I was going to say it wasn't planned for the pandemic, obviously. Sure. But it was always planned to launch on 4/20. You know, that was our launch date. And Jordan had been building the site for like the better part of a year. Jordan is my partner, Jason's wife. She runs our company. So, you know, we launched on 4/20, and that was while everyone was in lockdown. And I fully expected to get reamed, you know, with people being like, you insensitive fucking clod, like, how dare you? And then there was definitely a small percentage of people that were, you know, like, ew, the timing of this sucks, but not what I thought it would be. Like, I was braced to be hit hard. Instead, it was what you referred to as like folks looking for a sense of normalcy. Yeah. Where suddenly they were like, yeah, no, I like this. Keep talking about your bullshit and whatnot, because that saves me. Like when I turn off the news, that's what I put on to forget about what I just saw.
And that was it kind of makes sense, right? But I didn't expect it. Like, you know, we do the Kind of Funny podcast, which is literally just 4 of us bullshitting at a table, just about whatever you want to talk about. And that's always done consistent views, consistent downloads, right? But when the pandemic started, all of a sudden those episodes spiked. We saw so many people come in. And when I mentioned it, people were like, well, no, it's like, before you tune in, whatever you're about your life. And now it is that thing of like, when the news is so sour and sad, like to just go and like have something that is you getting to hang out with your best friends that you don't get to go hang out with anymore. This is the way it is.
Think about it. It's like, you know, everyone's lives across all the spectrums was put into this weird position of like, go home, stay home. Yeah. Like a very primary school, very high school, you know, as we're kind of locked down, so to speak. Yeah. There's loss of community, loss of just hanging out with one's friends and stuff. The ability to hear you guys continue doing what you do. Number one, there's a fan base for it to begin with. Number two, people who are comforted by like, all right, if they're still doing that, if they're still getting together and gathering, that means that the world is not completely on fire. And then also a sense of normalcy of listening to like, oh, people be social. That's right. Like, can't wait till I get to do it again. But in lieu of me being able to go someplace, I'll listen to these cats talk to each other. I honestly, like, I'm not a wise man, so I couldn't have predicted it and stuff. Now in retrospect, you're like, yeah, everybody's home and everybody's good. So maybe a sense of normalcy or a sense of like those podcasts give me comfort and earworm and stuff. It allows you to go away from the computer and actually looking at the news and just put something in your ear and go have fun or watch a video or something like that. But at the same time, like, why isn't Quibi benefiting? You know what I'm saying? All of us but Quibi benefit. People being home. The only people in the world like Quibi and Jeff Katzenberg are like, no, the quarantine was not good.
Well, what Quibi was founded like to be like, you're waiting in a grocery store line, you're waiting at the bus stop, right? And everybody's like, no, motherfucker, I got 24 hours of content I need filled now.
Yeah, it's like nonstop. But like, it's weird. Like TikTok went through the roof during this period. YouTube viewership has gone up, but Quibi like just didn't kind of like hit. I know they keep saying like being in quarantine, like that's affected us, but I'm like, everybody's got copious amounts of time, more time to get to content than ever, even if the content is short and stuff. It's
got to be hard about it, having a fan or a user base too, right? You figure like, I think so many people like with us or with you or in YouTube and podcasts, like you've had that, you've already subscribed. And if you're like me with comics, right? Like how often do I just let my stuff build up on a Wednesday? And then it is one weekend where it's like, oh, I have an easy Sunday. I'll knock out all these books. Like, I feel like if you're just trying to get into something, it's a hard time to jump into Quibi when you already have these subscriptions and things you don't have.
So true. And everybody kind of like tumbling down the Netflix hole going like, oh, this exists. This exists now with a little more time on everybody's hands and as such as it was.
Yes, this is We Have Cool Friends, Kind of Funny's cool show where we interview our cool friends about the cool things they're doing. It usually posts each and every Monday on youtube.com/kindafunny and podcast services around the globe. Of course, you can go to patreon.com/kindafunny to get the show ad-free. Get it ad-free, and then get your questions read on this very show. Thank you, of course, to our Patreon producers, Mohammed, Blackjack, Al Tribesman, Connor Nolan. Today we're brought to you by Expressvpn and Manscaped, but I'll tell you about that later.
If my eyes look red, I'm going to smoke if that's cool.
Oh, please. More power to you.
My eyes look red already. It's not because I am presently stoned. It's because I just watched Animatics number 4 and 5 for our Masters of the Universe show that we're doing on Netflix, and they are fucking beautiful, man. The episodes 4 and 5 are not only like packed with adventure and story and character, but they're incredibly emotional. Like, and I'm not just talking about like, oh, I'm a stoner, so I cried, everything. I'm telling you, it's just some like well done storytelling, powerhouse animation kids who are bringing it to life. Just pop it, man. It's really good to look at just visually. But the performances that we got from our cast, just chef's kiss, man. It's crazy with characters that, most people associate with toys.
Yeah, totally.
And like most people think of the Masters of the Universe line of toys as like, we've all seen the toys that made us on Netflix. So we know that like, it wasn't a moment of inspiration like, I got a story to tell. They were like, we got toys to tell. And it created this whole line of IP, as they call it, intellectual property. But with those characters, man, and not like we burned this thing down and reinvented it and stuff. Ours is literally, our series is almost as if the next episode of the show that you watched on, growing up on weekdays is our first episode. We hone very close to mythology. And in fact, we're telling a story that they were kind of telling when they stopped doing the show. So as we kind of like start, it doesn't begin like, there've been like She-Ra is a brilliant reinvention of the old cartoon, the one that's just been on Netflix for a couple of years. We don't reinvent like that. What was it? Mike Young, I think, did the other He-Man run, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I think it was like the aughts, 2000 or something. a really like wonderful reinvention of the show that kind of told the story from the ground up again. But it just wasn't connected to the classic series, to the Filmation series. So even they do more reinvention than we do with ours. Ours is like our mandate when we got the job was, this is the sequel series. Like, just pick up like you're telling the next episode, but know now that like your audience is all grown up. Like, it's got to work for kids, but
Sure.
we were going after, you who grew up watching it and stuff like that. So it coalesced into something really special. And like, I'm a huge fan, obviously. I was involved with it, but like, I'm not the most likely choice. Like if somebody was like, we hired Kevin Smith to do Justice League cartoon, people go like, well, fuck, he has a show called Fat Man Beyond. He fucking loves Batman. That makes sense. Masters of the Universe, not so much. In my whole life, I've always like talked about like Tim Burton. They brought Tim Burton on to do Batman, and he wasn't really a fan like of comics hardcore. He started reading at that point and whatnot and got into it. People who reinterpret some of your favorite stuff weren't people that loved your favorite stuff to begin with. And I find myself in a situation where like we have done, it's not a reinterpretation, but a sequel series, and it's beautiful, and it may have helped that we were all just one step removed from the most ardent fandom. Like, if Batman's my guy, and if Marvel is my soap operas and stuff, I'm well aware of Masters of the Universe and all the He-Man world of IP, but I stopped collecting toys right when those cats hit the scene hard. So it's, I watched the cartoon, but like, it's not deep in my blood and DNA. And
you're not ride or die, yeah.
Well, now I am. Like, you would never have thought so, but like, there's something to be said for giving, our little team. It wasn't a bunch of people raised on the show, but people who had working familiarity with the show. And it turned into something really special, really beautiful that hones insanely close to the show. So the whole process has been breathtaking to me, because this is what's possible when like your marching orders are this. Like Teddy, who's our exec over at Netflix, his marching orders, like he was like, look, this was my number one fandom. I love, Batman. I love Star Wars, but Motu, Masters of the Universe, Motu is my number one. He's going, and when I watched this show, I always believed that He-Man was in trouble. I always thought every episode that what if Skeletor does get his hands on the sword? Like, I was deeply invested. It wasn't until I got older that I realized it was more campy and like there was nothing to worry about. He goes, all I ask is that with this incarnation, you treat it as seriously as I perceived it when I watched it as a kid. Give me the stakes, give me lives on the line, but like, it's not them doing cartwheels. If you ever watch the old show, they could barely clash swords. They didn't want violence in the cartoon and stuff. So, Teddy was like, let me see some sword fighting that I never got as a kid, but I just want to feel like these characters are treated seriously. He's like, I understand some of the IP is ridiculous. He's going, but like growing up, this was my religion. He's going, just make it like treat it as reverently as I felt about it. And we did. Like, we beyond mission accomplished, we like didn't just execute. I feel like we elevated, and it's not just in the scripts. It's like Powerhouse Animation has now taken it to this other level. Beautiful, beautiful storytelling. So watching the whole thing coalesce, and we had a boss over at Mattel who was a creative as well. Rob Davis is a great guy, but he's not just a dude, a suit at Mattel. He was writing Masters of the Universe comics for DC for the last few years. So he's deeply invested in the lore and the storytelling. And I'm telling you, man, like every time they send me a new animatic, it's all joy. The only bad thing about it is knowing that it's like a year before anyone else gets to see this shit.
Animation, right? Yeah, you got to sit on it forever.
It's like the animatic, for those that don't follow, it's like a bare bones, almost storyboard version of the cartoon that plays out in real time. So you can watch it. And, if you know what the script is inside and out, and as the showrunner I do, your mind fills in all the blanks on a very bare Etch-a-Sketch version of the cartoon. These guys do such a complete version of it, though, that there have been times where I'm like, release this shit on Netflix. Like, everyone will get it. Like, you don't have to be an animation wizard to understand what's going on in the story, because their storytelling is so tight, like so gripping. So that's the only downside, is like, man, like, I'll be talking about this shit for a year before anybody else gets to see what I've been talking about.
Yeah,
and I'm
your layers.
proud of everybody. It's so nuts. So I was just, before you got on, Julian came to like put me onto the Discord. I went into my room and changed and washed my face because I was just a snotty mess. Like, there's some moments in the episodes 4 and 5 which are like, I can't believe we're getting away with this with like characters that a lot of people would dismiss as goofy. And you know, and I guess it's no different. I mean, it's a lot different in as much as we don't have humans and the budget and expert storytelling, but it's no different than like when I first watched Game of Thrones, you know, I was like, what, dragons? And then I was like, oh, they're making it work. Like, never mind that some of this IP is goofy as heck. They're making it work. And I feel like that's kind of the balance that we've struck with this Masters of the Universe cartoon. And I cannot wait for people to see it. I think we're having a panel like for the, you know, they're doing the Comic-Con, San Diego Comic.
Yeah, whatever the new digital version of it is. Yeah.
So I think we're doing a Mattel and Netflix a panel to like introduce the artwork for the first time, so people see what the characters look like. And the characters look like their classic counterparts. Like, it's not like we reinvented this shit. Like, it's just like, hey man, draw what we all know, because that's the story that we're telling. But it's been great. Like, that's been one of the most creatively fulfilling like projects I've ever worked on. And it's always kind of bubbling under the surface. Like, I was working on this before I went on the Reboot Roadshow tour. I was working on it during the tour. And I've been working on it all through quarantine, because animation doesn't require everybody like to shut down. Everyone can do it from home. So the pace of Masters of the Universe has continued unabated regardless of the quarantine.
So here's my question about it, about Masters of the Universe. You talk about coming on and being, you know, the one step removed from it. So it's not your Bible. It's not how, you know, you grew up on comics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Does that scare you? Like, I think there's always that thing, you know how ravenous the internet is in general, let alone like when we talk about the comics we love or games we love or movies. For you to come in and be like, I'm going to do this, we're going to get in, we're going to do something different and serious with this IP. Do you worry that you wouldn't get it, or the audience wouldn't get it and they would reject it because you're not a true fan, air quotes?
If anything, it makes your game even sharper, because, you know, like, you're not walking in as like, hey man, have you ever seen my office? It's wall to wall Mattel or something like that. Yeah. So because of that, like, you know, the simple ways into that mythos. Like, you know, I did watch the cartoons while they were airing and stuff. So there was a working familiarity. But more importantly, we had two bosses that couldn't let us fail. Rob at Mattel was like, look, it's not just the show. This is a whole new line of toys for us. So, you know, and you can't just do whatever you want, particularly because, like, you hire Kevin Smith and some people be like, oh, he's going to make He-Man fart or something like that. He's going to snooch to the nooch, whatever. So there was always, like, you know, on the Mattel side through Rob, not somebody saying you can't do this, but a creative partner who could always be like, if you're like, and then, you know, He-Man hits this guy, and Rob would be like, make it Whiplash, because we haven't used Whiplash yet. And you're like, oh my God, yes. All right. So He-Man hits Whiplash. So there's somebody to always make sure that, like, you are doing all of the IP justice. You know, like, we were able to work in characters that have never been seen on the cartoon, were made as figures, but never got to debut and stuff like that. So, you know, we had the full blessing of Mattel, but also the full expertise of Rob, who's not only like runs this line, but also has been writing Masters for the last few years. And then even more so, the guy who signs our paychecks. This was his passion project. Yeah. That's why I feel safe as a kitten, because that we could, like, he wouldn't let it go. If it wasn't what he wanted it to be, it never would have gotten past the pitch stage. So as the world's biggest Masters of the Universe fan, the biggest Motu guy in the room was also our boss. So we had no choice, you know what I'm saying? And he was a collaborative partner as well. So it wasn't, you know, I remember when we did like a writer's room, he came to one of the first two. I think it was the first, I think he popped into the first one. And then for the second one, I'll never forget him. And this is a guy who oversees, no bullshit, 50 shows at Netflix, if not more. But since this was his fucking childhood favorite, we're all sitting on couches and he was like kneeling on the floor at like a table, passionately going, ooh, ooh, you can do this as well. So we had a collaborator who was also very deep in the mythos. If you ever look at his Instagram is Anime Ted. Okay. He constantly does dioramas with his like insane collection. So between Rob and Teddy, I knew we could not fail, even without me being like, oh man, I could tell you every episode, name a number. I could tell you who wrote those episodes. I could tell you the vocal talent across them. Even though I wasn't that guy, even though I can't present you with shelves full of toys and stuff, between those two titans, we couldn't possibly derail. You know what I'm saying? So I never felt like, man, I hope we nail it, because we wouldn't have ever moved any steps forward if those two dudes weren't like, I'm on board, I'm on board. It was nice that they reached out to me, but at the same time, they weren't like, reinvent this. Like our mantra was laid out very clearly. It was like, we are the quote unquote sequel series. We were intended to appeal to people my age, people your age, who grew up on the cartoon and who now have kids of their own, who they will sit down and watch this with and be like, this was my jam when I was a kid. And ours wasn't like about change it, take in a new direction. There is a kids show that they're doing, which is a 3D, you know, like a CG cartoon.
Sure, yeah.
The universe where, you know, it's mostly, it's aimed at the audience that the original cartoon was aimed at. Ours was always meant to be, for lack of a better description, Teddy himself, the grown-up fan who was like, this was my jam. And, you know, given keys to the kingdom at Netflix, he did the Dark Crystal. You know, he's been in charge of some like incredible efforts over at Netflix since he's gotten there. This has long been his like passion project. Sure. So between those two ferns, this was never going to be anything but exactly what it was designed to be. So fan servicing that, you know, anyone who grew up running around the backyard screaming, I have the power.
Yep. Hold the sword up. Yeah.
They're going to be taken right back to it. Like I'm so fucking proud of it, man. And it's so nice because it's like, it's not mine, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody in charge of their crown jewels, and we buffed them, polished them, gave them back. And so far they've been like, great job. So it's been this fun thing going under my last year, 2 years of my life, or however long it's been, bubbling under. And now I'm starting to see like, this is what it's finally going to look like. But one more year, I think, close before anyone else gets to see it.
A long gestating project. How does it feel and how does it compare to do stuff like that where you're talking about it, where it's not yours? You're borrowing the keys, adding to this mythos, and then going about your own life versus something like the View Askew universe. Like, where's the trade-off there?
The trade-off is like, generally speaking, the job. This is the job. Like, I breathe rarefied air as, you know, what they call an auteur. I get to write and direct my own flicks or whatever, building my own little View Askew universe. Like, not everyone does the job that way. Some people do the job of like, let's say directing, where they're like, I don't write. Somebody gives me a script and I go crazy. Like Martin Scorsese, one of our greatest filmmakers, not a writer. You know, he's been involved in story, but like, he doesn't write a screenplay. He's a guy who's like, you give me a screenplay, I'm going to give you something back. So in my world, I'm used to generating story ideas and telling my dopey little stories. And the bar is only as high as I set it. Like, you know, it's only got to be as good as a Kevin Smith movie. It doesn't have to be as good as a normal movie and stuff. With this, when you handle somebody else's toys, there's a bar that you have to hit. There's already an expectation. And when you're dealing with nostalgic, sentimental expectation, that's through the roof. I mean, talk to Ryan Johnson, talk to J.J. Abrams. Like, you fuck up somebody's childhood, according to them, you'll never hear the end of it. So there's a kind of like, man, we're on a tight wire. I hope there's a net below us, level of heart palpitation as you work on somebody else's thing. But at the same time, you're also way more open to suggestion. So, for example, on my stuff, it's my stuff. And so people could be like, oh, did you ever think about doing this? Did you ever think about doing this? Like, somebody gave me a great fucking note on the script for Twilight of the Mallrats where I was like, oh my God, it's so like, yeah, I'm gonna totally do that. And it literally, doesn't change the movie, but does change a big part of Brody's character. And, to me, I'm like, that's a great suggestion. It's a great note. Totally happy to take that. But generally speaking, if people are like, you should reshape this to be like this, that's what I'm like, no, this is my thing. Like, I create my thing so I don't have to fucking take notes. Like, that was the idea. When you're working on somebody else's thing, gotta take notes. You can't be the person that's like, whoa, I got this. This is my self-expression. It is a self-expression, but it's put together with first, a team of writers, and it's based and predicated on stories that have been told for years prior. And, in this case, toys that have existed for a long time. So there's certain parameters already that you're entering the game with, knowing that you're doing this. Unless they're like, hey, we want the grown-up adult version, meaning like the XXX version, I'm not going to bring anything to it that I normally bring to my day job where, the Tila and He-Man aren't going to sit around and talk about, how many dicks did you say, that sort of stuff. So at the end of the day, like, you tend to treat it more reverently, you gotta. And like, at the same time, you're like, in our writer, like, if I was doing imagine if this was Clerks 3, we wouldn't have had a writer's room. Even if I was doing like, multiple episodes of a Clerks cartoon, but it was meant to be one big story, which is what we're doing with Masters of the Universe Revelation. It's just one gigantic epic story that's broken up into chapters. So if I was doing that with, say, Clerks 3, where I was like, oh, I'm just going to do it as a cartoon, but I'm going to do it over like, 20 chapters and stuff, and you tell the whole story, chop it up. I wouldn't hold a writer's room because Clerks 3 is like, that's my heart and soul.
Yeah,
But Masters of the Universe, it was me, Tim, Eric, Dia, and Mark, all coming up with the scripts. I came up with a story like that when Tel reached out. They're like, hey, would you like to work on He-Man? This is the parameters. This is it, blah, blah, blah. And they told me, they're like, we already have a deal at Netflix. I was like, oh my God. Normally, they want you to go pitch someplace and fingers crossed. They already had a deal for a cartoon. We just had to come up with what that cartoon would be. So, I kind of came up with a story, pitched it. Mattel liked it. We went to Netflix. They liked it and stuff. Then you're hired as the showrunner. And so you bring in your writers and you're like, this is the story we're telling. Let's start telling it. What would make it better and stuff. All those cats like put meat on the bones, made it better. If we were making Clerks 3, I wouldn't have invited people in to help me tell the story. I would be at a laptop just doing it myself. So because you're actually working with others, it's weird to say, but like, Masters of the Universe has a chance of being something that the widest possible audience in the world could enjoy.
Sure.
But working on my stuff, you're only ever going to capture Kevin Smith fans, which I'm great with. Like, I've spent 26 years just going after Kevin Smith fans. But it won't, at a certain point, translate to anybody else. Some people will be like, what, I got enough like 10 other movies to get this shit? Fuck that. Whereas Masters of the Universe, even though there were all these other cartoons, you're going to be able to sit down, watch this thing. It's user-friendly. You can pick it up. Anybody could adapt to it. Anybody could see their stories reflected in it and stuff. And that's because there are way more chefs in the kitchen, way more influences, way more diversity, and I don't even mean the normal use of the term diversity. The moment you have 5 writers as opposed to 1 writer,
right,
you're going to have something better, presumably. Now, that's not me shitting on single storytellers. Like, obviously, Quentin Tarantino, I don't care if he's one guy. You never put him in a room with a bunch of writers. He don't need it. He is that room. So, but for me, I was like, well, this is not necessarily like mine to be covetous with, mine to be like, everyone fuck off, I'm doing this by myself. Like getting the job, like where they were like, we like that story, do that as the story. That was like, ego boosting enough where I was like, oh, they like me and I got the job. So because it wasn't my characters, something I didn't create, I'm a lot more open to collaboration. Like, what should we do? As opposed to like when I'm writing my View Askew stuff, it's like, what do I want to say? What do I want to do? And beyond what I wanted to say, like now there's this weird kind of like, you got a whole character universe of characters. And what you say here now, for a fact is going to be remembered 2 decades from now. Yeah. Like it's not as simple as like, oh, as a joke in a movie. It's like they will watch your fucking shit on Netflix, pause it, and finally see that it wasn't a fucking sailboat in the goddamn picture. So, know what awesome responsibility you have now going forward. So then, in that world, I spend a lot more time obsessing over every detail of a View Askew effort, whereas in Motu world, I have so much support.
Sure.
Like, there was a beautiful like example of this. We had a great script. And it turned into a great episode for episode 4. And there was an opportunity for a villainous henchman, like just, a nameless, faceless kind of like, he's obviously going to be sacrificed at the end of a sword, probably a sword of power. So, we're not going to use any of our hardcore famous cats. You're not going to put Clawful in there because we need him else places. And also like, like Clawful's a rock star of these villainous characters. So Teddy, was it Rob? It was either Rob or Teddy was just like read the script and said, oh, instead of like, just a foot soldier, make that like blast attack. And you're like, oh, yes. And you just know then that like somebody who like, Mom, can I get blast attack? That moment happens in our show, they're going to roll a tear. They're like, oh my God, they even thought him blast attack, like for heaven's sake. And I would never have done that myself. Like, but it took some other outside voice to be like, ooh, throw that in there. And if it was me doing a View Askewniverse movie, like I don't know how else to describe it because they're mine, I bristle instantly at suggestion. While we're making the movie, I'm happy now for people to ad lib. In the beginning, I wasn't. I was hardcore, like, no, just do the script.
I wrote the words.
Oh, the words. I wrote the words and stuff. But now, like, I still have a gut reaction if somebody's like, you know what you should do? And they pitch you like something that's not what you had in mind at all and stuff. That's when I'm like, I don't even get like politely, I don't politely decline. That's when I'm like, why would anyone do that? Like you get shitty with people. Like, how dare you? What the fuck are you thinking? With Masters, there was never anyone that could say anything where I would ever have that reaction. Like, what are you, fucking dumb? Like, that's stupid. Like, number one, based on the IP, the sky is the limit. Like, you gotta, Orko has no legs and floats and does magic. Like, so what could possibly be a stupid suggestion? You know what I'm saying? Anything could play. So it was like such a rare experience. Like, honestly, like it's like, it may be what like the Russos feel like when they're given like the Marvel characters, except I know they're more tightly like tied to them. One of them at least is like grew up reading the books and stuff. Yeah. But like where you're just like, oh my Lord, like every chance, every cut, every line that you write is an opportunity not just to tell like a good story in the present, but to like light the fires of somebody's childhood inside the cold, dark heart where suddenly they're like, and so if I'm sitting here crying watching this shit, what's it going to be like for a kid who's like, I had every toy and they were given to me by my parents. They would take me whenever I went to the doctor, and I had to go to the doctor a lot in those days. I got a figure and stuff. Like people who it's like tied into their DNA, I'm telling you, it's going to work like crazy. So it's a wonderful feeling, man, but not enough for me to like chase it.
Sure.
Like where I'm like, now I'm calling up Kevin Feige and going, I'm ready. Like this was the perfect speed for me because so many other people do so much of the heavy lifting and working. Like, you know, I'm the showrunner, but I technically wrote only 2 scripts. I wrote on all the other scripts, like in each one, but at the end.
No, Kevin froze. Oh, I know.
They hand you over to the animators, and then Powerhouse does all the incredibly heavy lifting. Because let's be honest, this has to stand as an entertainment that can be enjoyed even if the sound was down. And you know, it's a cartoon, for heaven's sakes. Like it has to be appreciated on a visceral, visual level by people ages 0 to like 90. So they're really doing the heavy lifting. So like in terms of, I've seen the breakdown of those Marvel movies, and when somebody goes to direct one of those, like you're on deck 24/7. You live and breathe that shit. And you lose weight, like, you know, because you're constantly in it. And I could do that for my stuff. I don't know if I could do it for other people's stuff. Like I as much as I love the stuff, that's where I stopped being a filmmaker and resume being a fan, because it's like, oh, that's a lot of work. On all those CW shows I've ever done, like on Flash and Supergirl, they're only 9 days long. But usually by day 6 rather, or day 7, that's when I'm like, are we not done yet? Are we still shooting? Like seriously? Like I feel like we should be done. But my attention span, it's not like it's shorter or I'm like a poodle, but I just don't have it as much because what I was raised on was my shit. Kevin Smith shit don't take you more than a month in front of a camera. I don't think we've ever gone more than like 30 days on a shoot. So, you know, but those things are massive and have, you know, billions of dollars involved and at stake. So, you know, they take a long time to do it. I don't have the patience for that kind of shit. But for this, for Masters of the Universe, like I was engaged and active and called upon like the perfect amount, where this was never like, oh, fucking got this He-Man job. Like it was always a joy to go to work because it wasn't constant work. Like think about it. When you're a showrunner, like other people write scripts. So, you know, you've said, here's the story. He-Man does this and the Skeletor says this. And basically you got to take it from this point to this point because the next episode we're doing this. Here's all the details and stuff. Go nuts. Writer goes off, comes back to you like 2 weeks, a month later, with a script, which on a purely, you know, on a storytelling level, like was easy to blow through because none of our scripts were longer than 22 pages because each episode is like a half hour. So boom, you're blazing through it. And it's also predicated on a story that you told months ago. Like this is what I see the whole story as. So you're seeing a tiny piece of the story that you told months ago writ large. It's a joy where you're like, I've accomplished something, even though you didn't really have that much to do with the actual accomplishment. And then if you want to, you could go in on top of it and sprinkle in some other stuff like, ooh, let's add this, let's gild the lily and stuff. So it's this beautiful process, man. But like, dude, I was used to enough. If they needed me more, then I would have been like, ugh, I don't like this thing. Like it allowed me to do this without having to give up all the other shit I love doing.
And that's, I think, honestly, I connect with this so much right now because a week ago, Gary Whitta, my friend and one of the writers on Rogue One, we got our Batman story published, or Joker story published in Joker's 80th.
The 80th, what was it? The 80th? What is it?
Yeah, super spectacular. Joker's 80th anniversary, super spectacular #1, right? And
how awesome was that?
It's literally exactly what you're describing, where me and Gary had a 3-hour breakfast. We sat down, we figured it out. We put out the plot points. We, you know, said what the lines were going to be. Gary came back with a script. I read through it. I made these additions, these changes, whatever. And then we sent it off to an artist. And then Dan Mora sent back all this amazing art and he put in all these references and even the things we said we wanted, he made better and did this thing. And it was like, wow. And then it's out now and people are like, you guys did such a great job. I'm like, we did, but like this is such a bigger thing that it doesn't work without the artist, right? It doesn't work without people doing the heavy lifting.
You need the eyeballs. And isn't it like the delayed gratification in stages of creativity? Number one, you're like, what? We get to do this? Like, let's be honest. Anybody could write a He-Man story. Anybody could write a Joker story. To get paid to do it and have it be official canon by the companies that own those trademarks, that's next level shit. That's those people who own those characters going, we trust you, go ahead. Number one, there's a creative thrill right there, because you're like, I'm worthy. That's amazing. And there's a creative thrill as you get together, come up with a story. Then there's a creative thrill when you write the script and you hand it in. And there's a creative thrill when they approve it and say, hey, this is great. We're going to hand it off to an artist. That should be the end of it until people read it, and then you get the creative thrill of feedback. But instead, we get this additional step where somebody, a month later or whatever goes, here's what it looks like. You get this all new creative thrill of like now I'm seeing it. It ain't just words on the page. And suddenly you get a second bite at the apple sometimes if you want, where you're like, wait, we can add dialogue. We can do this. We can do this because look at this picture is cool as hell. It just gives and gives and gives, man. So, it's nice to get paid for these things, of course. But the creative fulfillment alone keeps a person young. It keeps you vital. It keeps you engaged. Like, it's endorphins flowing, not because you're like, I'm drinking or doing drugs to get there. Natural highs of like, I brought something to life from nothing and people are reading it and liking it. People are hopefully watching it and appreciating it and stuff. Nothing quite like it. And plus, think about it. You aggregated over the course of, let's say, 10 years. You aggregated from a fan of a thing to a professional at a thing. Like, you wrote you wrote a Joker story, bro.
Yeah.
How, you know what I'm saying? There's
totally.
A lot of people in the world have written Joker stories at DC Comics, but it's a fucking finite list. Like, in terms of endearment, Jack Nicholson had that line where he's just like, there's 30 astronauts in the world. I'm fucking one of them. Like, that's a big fucking deal, man. You enter a pantheon. Doesn't matter how big or small that story is. You've been officially allowed to tell a fucking Joker story. And there ain't that many people in this world, although there have been lots. That list is fucking finite. That's huge. That's everything.
Yeah. And it's exactly what you're talking about. I think of, I'm so lucky that Kind of Funny is the day job, right? And it is the 9 to 5 that most people would kill to have, to play games, travel the world, talk about what they do with their friends. That's the job, right? It's pretty nice. But then, to have this creative sprinkle, right? This icing on the cake, something that is out of your wheelhouse, but gets to go out there and change, be part of somebody's lives, I should say, and see them with the book and have that physical manifestation. It's awesome.
And as a business person, it's just one piece of diversification for you. Now, you've got a reputation in another medium where there's a bunch of people who are like, I love this story. Who wrote this? Who's this guy? Who are these guys? I got to look up their work. Oh, this guy's he did Rogue One. Oh, this guy's got, what is this? Like, well, I'm Kind of Funny. I'm in. And you pick up a new fan. You know what I'm saying? Or take one of your people who's a fan and you're like, I wrote a comic book. Like, comic books, I don't fuck with that. And then they read it and they're like, holy shit, this is a comic book? I'm in. And you've brought a fan over to the other side. Yeah. So, creativity varies. And plus, it was just something positive to do over the course of the last fucking year or however long it was in your life. Yeah. And if over the course of the last few months, anything could be created amidst, destruction of all kinds, as we've just seen, not just from COVID, but like historically as well. That's a good thing. Positive creativity.
Yeah, and it's worth, you naturally got there. I want to thank you again, obviously, for 5 years ago having us on Smodcast, you coming on our show, because that crossover is the one that speaks the loudest of the people. When I meet somebody at a meet and greet or see somebody at a PAX or a Comic-Con or whatever, and you're like, oh, where'd you find us? And like, oh, I was a Kevin Smith fan. I was a Smodcast fan. I found you guys there, so I went back. And I've had it a little bit the other way of people who are like, I never watched his movies, but I liked him on the show, and now I did. We just did a View, Askew, and Review where we went through and watched all the movies again.
Yeah, did all the flicks and whatnot, which I was very flattered.
This episode of We Have Cool Friends is brought to you by Expressvpn. Okay, so we all know how Expressvpn protects your privacy and security online, right? But there's something you might not know. You can also use Expressvpn to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Now that so many of us are stuck at home, it's only a matter of time until we run out of stuff to stream on Netflix. That's why this whole week, Cool Greg, that's right, Tim's brother, the coolest Greg I know, has been using ExpressVPN to binge different shows, I believe from the UK, more cartoons and stuff. Because you can go, I don't have to explain it. I can explain it through the things. It's so simple. You fire up ExpressVPN's app, you change your location to the UK, and you refresh Netflix, and that's it. Suddenly a new library of content. See, ExpressVPN hides your IP address and lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different companies, or countries, not companies. So just think about all the Netflix libraries you can go through. Love anime? Use ExpressVPN to access Japanese Netflix and be spirited away. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service: Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason we use ExpressVPN to watch shows is that it's ridiculously fast. There's never any buffering or lag, and you can stream in HD no problem. ExpressVPN is also compatible with all of your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more. So you can watch what you want on whatever screen you want, wherever you are. If you visit our special link right now, expressvpn.com/morning, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Support the show, watch what you want to watch, and protect yourself with ExpressVPN at expressvpn.com/morning. Our other sponsor is Manscaped. Listen up, fellas, because today we have a new Manscaped product alert. Manscaped just released the Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. Take a look in the mirror, and I guarantee you'll see hairs sticking out of those holes. It's time to keep your ear and nose hair looking as nice as your clean-shaven pubes. My wife, Geneviève Saint-Onge Miller, the love of my life, hates my ear hair. And when we watch movies, a lot of times she'll turn and talk to me and then start picking at my ears. And I hate that. So I have to try to remember to do it, and I never do it. And the Weed Whacker would help with that. This nose and ear hair trimmer provides proprietary skin-safe technology that helps prevent nicks, snags, tugs on those delicate holes. The premium Manscaped Weed Whacker uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system. Its intelligently contoured design enhances the trimming experience and is waterproof, which makes it easy to operate and to clean. The only nose hair trimmer on the market with a powerful and rechargeable lithium-ion battery that lasts for up to 90 minutes of use. That sounds like a lot of trimming, but maybe you're that overgrown. I don't know. It's time to upgrade your Manscaped routine with the Weed Whacker. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code MORNING at manscaped.com. Thank you, Manscaped, for keeping our pubes trimmed and our hairs and our holes looking nice. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code MORNING at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code MORNING. What are you waiting for? Go whack your weeds. Oh, of course.
We can get to talk about Reboot. How as an old school fan, how did Reboot play for you?
I loved it. I legitimately did. And it was that thing of, I didn't know what I was getting, you know what I mean? And it was coming into actually watching it. Cause when when you did the 2-night premiere, I was doing an event somewhere and I couldn't go see it. And then I think when you came through the Bay Area, I was also booked somewhere, so I couldn't do that. So I had to wait for it to be on demand. And at that point, it was this weird mix of people who really liked it and people who it did not work for. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm about to get. And I remember watching it, and I came in the next day and Nick had watched it too. And he's like, I watched Reboot last night. I'm like, what did you think? He's like, I really liked it too. Like, for me, it was what I wanted to see out of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Cause I always talked about that one being one that's just, it is, you always talk about it too. It's just dick and fart jokes, right? It's the side characters becoming and going out and doing their thing. And I was always like, but like, you always had something to say, and this is what the movies were, and blah, blah, blah. To get to Reboot and have me tear up multiple times at it, you know what I mean? Yeah. To not only that, have my wife's along for the ride, and for most of them, I think it was her first time seeing it. For all of them, it was her first time seeing them in English because she's French Canadian, and so watching Reboot and that ended, and she was crying right when Harley and Jay are having their moments, and it was like, wow. We finished it. She's like, I loved that. I thought that was great. And I was like, exactly right. Like, I thought it was so awesome to see Jay and Silent Bob have something to say on that level.
Who was I think Nate Gonzalez was like, I think he goes, it feels like Clerks 2 of Jay and Silent Bob. I was like, oh yeah, like it is. It's, if you watch Clerks 2, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot back to back, they're very similar movies, very similar in theme and tone. They're the grow-up movies. Like, sure. In Clerks 2, the boys grow up. In Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, those boys kind of grow up and stuff. And those are the movies I feel like, they age me, but not in that negative way where I'm like, they show how old I am.
Yeah.
That's me going, this is what I feel like at this age. And Reboot was not just like, this is what I feel like at this age, but also followed the heart attack. It was like, oh my God, I'm just glad to be alive. So I'm going to make a fan film about my favorite subject, Kevin Smith. And so more so than Strike Back, like Strike Back years later occurs to me as me going, we made 4 movies. Let's talk about all of them in the 5th one. Like that's kind of what Strike Back was. It was this weird victory lap of me going like, I can't believe we've come this far. So some people always like took it as like, ew, it's a gross fan film. And I'm like, yes, because I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. Reboot felt like an earned fan film because it's like he has been around for 25 years. So if he wants to make a movie where he blows himself, let him do it. He just survived a heart attack. It was kind of like the best time that like to put that movie out there. I think we would have been destroyed any other time. Going out when we did, people even I think some people pulled their punches because they were like, he did almost die, you know, and let me go and shit.
No, I'm right there with you. Like that was the thing of being a fan, right? And watching Strikes Back in the day. And I know this sounds so trite now with MCU and all these other movie universes. It was that moment of being like, oh my God, you know, Banky is going to be in this movie, and Brody and Holden and not even knowing Alyssa at the time was going to be in it. But like you get there and you get those moments, and they were like things like when we did the review, and I'm talking about it from such a different perspective. That, well, me and Kevin, who's on the call silent, are the big View Askew fans in the same way. It's like we were talking about it from this very much like we wanted those moments, we wanted to see him inserted, yada yada yada. But it always was exactly what you're saying, where that one was a look who we have and look who we have and look who we have. Whereas I thought Reboot really was like, look who we have and what they have to say. Look at where their lives are now. Even like the pretty much throwaway line of Brody talking about co-parenting with Renee was just a cool reference into how they've grown up and how they've gone, let alone when we do get to Holden and we do get to Alyssa and we do get to Chasing Amy, like that stuff punches, man.
Oh, it was, and the Chasing Amy, I've talked about so many times, but the Chasing Amy shit wasn't even in there when we started the movie, only existed in the last week of production. I wrote the script, then only came to life on the very last day of production because we didn't have Ben. I didn't think Ben was coming and stuff, and then all of a sudden everything changed. Yeah. So, but I had to take out more Brody stuff because I was also seeding the earth for like the Mallrats thing.
Of course,
me,
yeah.
Like if I'm never gonna get to make like a fucking Mallrats sequel, I'm gonna try to cram as much of it into this one scene as possible. So like in the end credits of the movie, you hear him talk about his daughter more and shit like that. It was, you know, for me, it was nice because I got to take every one of the characters and be like, and this is what they'd be like now. Yeah. You know, like because Brody makes sense. Like that Brody is exactly who Brody is. And when we spend more time with him in Twilight of the Mallrats, like, you know, you'll wonder if that's such a good thing that Brody is still the same like person and stuff.
Totally. Like he's a time capsule, right? He gets this dream job of hosting the Tonight Show, and he's still like, you know what? My basement / comic shop is where I'd rather be. And it's like, all right, that's cool that you'd give it all up, but where does that? And he's there 20 years later. You're like, well, wait a second.
Brody is a man who like had one good idea and turned it into a lifetime. And of course, I identify with that.
Dear to your heart.
I mean, that's like, you know, Brody in Twilight of the Mallrats is, you know, a reflection of my career over the last few years. Like he found his fucking thing and dug in like a tick. And so like while life has gone on around him, he is resolutely stuck in the 90s. And so that's kind of like what Twilight of the Mallrats is about underneath it all and stuff. It's, you know, when my wife and kid read the script, they were both like, apology accepted. You know, that's what they did for the script, which I thought was kind of funny.
How long do we have you? We had you till 2:30, but I know you were late. Do you have another thing I got to get you out of here for?
There you go. You let me know when you're done.
Okay. Talking about Jay and Silent Bob reboot and talking about the Chasing Amy scene that was added there. One of the things we were talking about in our review of it was that came up, obviously, the story that it had been added. And we of course thought, oh my God, well, like what made the movie so powerful is that moment, is Jay having his realization of like, fuck this, let the movie happen, whatever. I got to go be a dad. If that wasn't going to happen, was there a scene that was going to replace it that was going to drive home that point?
Great question. Yes. So what existed prior to that was you see in the end credits, they come out from behind the cartoon cutouts themselves. And he's like, this place got there's more lens flare than a J.J. Abrams movie in here or something like that. The next thing he saw was an image. Jay looks around and then he, focuses. We cut to a little moment on the Chronicon floor. There's a dad dressed like Silent Bob, because everyone's Jays and Bobs at the con. There's a Silent Bob dad figure. He's got a little daughter, like a 4-year-old Jay daughter, who was going to be played by Jay's daughter, who wound up playing Ben's daughter in the movie. So it was going to be Logan, in a Jay outfit, and a father dressed like Silent Bob, who we were actually going to have Jay play it since he was wearing a beard and shit like that. The idea was he sees this moment where the dad is putting a lanyard around the kid's neck, and then the kid gives dad a hug, and we push in on that, and then we push in at Jay as he's realizing, without Holden's monologue, that he's, fucking losing his opportunity here, that perhaps going about stopping the movie is not as important as being there for the daughter he was never there for. So we go from that push in to that push in, and then Jay turns to Silent Bob, quite like in the Holden scene, and says, you know what, I haven't been there for Millie her whole life, Silent Bob, and so that's where he has the turn. He has the turn visually, whereas adding Ben to the movie allowed me to have Ben deliver the turn, which is something that like I've always done in stuff. For example, Mallrats, Stan Lee is the turn for Brody. He gives him the big speech and Brody is better for it, and Brody heads off into the third act. Silent Bob is the turn for Holden, Jay and Silent Bob, but it's Silent Bob's speech that connects with Holden and propels him into the third act and stuff, so forth and so on. So I felt like, oh shit, like if I've got Ben and I could play with Holden, like maybe I could do the reverse Chasing Amy scene where like they once gave him advice that like changed and shaped his life. Here's his opportunity to actually give them useful, usable, good advice that they could apply like to their lives. So that's when I was like, oh shit, like he could be the turn for them. And I didn't know what I was going to do with them because we had literally shot everything except Chronicon. So I had no place to like put Ben into anywhere else in the movie without having to seriously affect what happened after that, which we'd already shot. We shoot out a sequence, but we wound up shooting everything except Chronicon, which we saved for the last week of the show. So I had to stick him in Chronicon, and it's obvious, now you're like, oh shit, because I didn't know I was using him as Holden. I was just trying. At first, I wanted to use him as Cocknock because Mark couldn't do it. Because I called Mark. I was like, "You want to play Cockknocker?" He was like, "The Empire won't let me," so I couldn't use Mark. So I was like, maybe Ben could play Cockknocker. Then I was thinking about it, going like, no, man, like you're at Chronicon, and Ben played Holden, and Holden co-created, Blunt Man and Chronic. So there's a play here where like he could be at that Chronicon. If he runs into the boys, you got a reverse Chasing Amy situation where he could kick their asses into the third act. Like, and so then I started fan fictioning it where I'm like, oh my God, like where would he be? His life right now. And like, what would he have to offer? Like, he clearly has to pass on father advice because that's our theme. And that's what Jay has to realize he wants to be. So at that point, what would he know about being a dad unless he was a dad? Wait, if he's a dad, who would he be dad with? I can't introduce a new character. What if? And then it starts spitballing. Like, what if him and Alyssa are co-parenting and have this kid together? Like he helped her and her, partner a kid. So they're still entwined in one another's lives, just not in that traditional way. They never had a traditional relationship. So like this would stand to reason. What I loved about that as a Chasing Amy, fan was, at the end of Chasing Amy, you see Holden like on a path, like he might just get it. He realized some shit too late and he lost his opportunity with Alyssa, but he seems to have grown. There's a promise of growth and change. In Reboot, it's promise delivered, because there's no way on earth that 1997 Holden could have even thought to be involved in this relationship where he's a father with this woman who he loves, but he can't be with because she'd rather be with this other person. Like, he's grown so much so that he's involved in what most would consider is an unorthodox family relationship. Doesn't look like tradition. Like, and Holden was always like talking about the standard, where he was like, you want me to tell you that's the standard? Like, he had a very standard view of the world. Being Alyssa and being in her life as long as he's been opened up that world. He's literally a better person for having known her. And just because they're not involved in a romantic relationship anymore doesn't mean they're not deeply connected. And now at a level even deeper than sex, like they share a human being that they brought into the world, like, together and stuff. So all of that was like, oh my God, like this is rich tapestry. Dump in the middle of the movie. My only fear was you stop the movie to do like a scene that feels like it's from another movie altogether. You know, like, we're on this journey and there's definitely heart to it and stuff.
Sure.
You're literally going to stop and put on this show-stopping monologue where the guy communicates the entire theme. You know, and for me as the filmmaker who always tells and doesn't show, like, I had tried to create a moment that was visual, where, you know, Jay sees the dad and the kid. And that's what a filmmaker would honor. But given the opportunity, like, take Holden out of the box and show people, like, look how much this boy has grown. Like, just allowed me to like dive back into Amy in such a fucking weirdly fulfilling way. So I'm sitting there at like 3 a.m. smoking weed, writing this scene, going like, and if they had a kid, that kid's name could only be Amy. Oh my God, I'm a genius, you know. And I would go the next day and I would tell people, like, if Holden and Alyssa had a baby, what do you think that baby's name would be? You know, and like Jason was like, I don't know, Ben Jr. I'm like, Ben Jr., what are you, fucking nuts? I'm like, Amy. And he's like, why? And I'm like, fucking movie's called, fuck you. You know, I just but I felt so like clever putting it all together and shit. But I was a little scared that that scene would happen in the movie. People would be like, this is where I'm going to get popcorn. I'm going to get beer. Like, this is too touchy-feely and shit. They went with it, man. I think they were just so happy to see Ben back. There was a lot of warmth for that, where people are like, you guys are fucking friends again. Like, holy shit, just seeing us all together. And I forget sometimes, believe me, I never forget any of my movies. I live them on a daily basis, but I forget to a lot of people, like maybe who didn't go on the Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back ride, or whether they did or not. Like, Ben and me and Jason being together in a scene is an instant like reappropriation of the happiest time of the audience's life in many cases. I was in my late college career and I saw Chasing Amy, and that was like when I met the woman who would become my wife or whatever. And you see those 3 dudes together, they're all still alive. One of them almost died of a heart attack. Like, instantly, before anyone utters a word of dialogue, you've got the audience, you know, and they're yours to lose. Thankfully, I handed a monologue to a guy who just made it sing. It was like handing a Stradivarius to the right fucking violin player and stuff. And my God, Affleck just knocked it out of the park. And people were content like that. You could hear a pin drop in those screening, you know, except for the jokes during the scene. While
Dude,
he was
Martha joke is insane. I loved that Martha joke so much.
Come on, man. And that he was willing to do it was beautiful. And then we only did 2 takes of that monologue, and most of the monologue comes from the first take. Second take, the only thing I really use is him deadpanning to the camera after he goes, whose name escapes me, and then looks straight down the barrel. I didn't even ask for that. I'm sitting behind the monitor. He did that. I was like, shit, ching. So yeah, it was in the middle of a movie that was like, you know, oh my God, this is, I always described it as like, remember Big Fish? The end of Big Fish, Albert Finney gets carried throughout his entire life, and he's seeing all the people that were characters in his life. every day of making Reboot felt like the end of Big Fish, where I'm like, oh my God, it's you. Oh my God. Like Biggs and Vanderbeek, when they showed up on set, they were going back and forth in this like verbal fucking tennis way, where I was like, oh my God, like, so you guys became friends after that movie and just kept hanging out. And they were like, we haven't seen each other since Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It just brought the warmth to it regardless and stuff. So every day I felt like, oh my God, it's like a flashback. I'm like, I'm seeing my life flash before my eyes. That was without Ben. Then you added Ben to it. Like, forget it, man. The whole thing was, that allowed me to bring Joey into it as well.
Sure.
And the weird, like, it's a tiny detail and shit, but like Joey in Reboot, Alyssa is with her partner. My sister, Virginia, plays her partner. Virginia was the last girl that you see Joey with at the end of Chasing Amy, when she's like sitting there at the table with her at the Comic-Con, when Holden like brings over the copy of Chasing Amy and shit. Then Holden leaves and she says, who was that? And Joey's like, just some guy. My sister was in New Orleans while we were shooting the movie out, and she was leaving. And I was like, can you fucking stick around for 2 more days? Because if I stick you in this scene, this allows me to reframe Chasing Amy as a love story that only begins in the last 2 minutes of the movie. Because you guys are fucking still together, like, 22 years later. There's the fucking love story and shit like that.
Yeah.
And so little shit like that was like, as a Kevin Smith fanboy, that made me fucking cream my jeans. And I got to watch that movie every night on tour with packed houses. We're talking 1,000, 1,500 people. And every one of those notes that were like delivered to the fans, the fan service notes, played rapturously, man. My whole career, that felt fucking wonderful as well, because my whole career always had people like on the studio side telling me like, why do you keep putting in references to the other movie? It alienates the audience. Like, if imagine you hear 10 people laugh in a theater and you don't know what they're laughing at, man, that takes you out of the movie. That's not a good movie going experience. And so I was always getting told by, hold your fucking sphincters, as I say the name, the Weinsteins, to fucking pull out references. Like, you always stop making references to the other movie. My whole thing was like, hey man, anybody who's going to like one that I made that's like connected to the other, like, it's for them. It's like, hey, if you saw Clerks, here's something you might enjoy. Hey, and it doesn't take you out of the fucking movie and shit. The thing I would always get criticized for was fan service. And now that is what this business is predicated on.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking like Avengers Endgame is like 2 hours plus some of the most exquisite fucking fan service in the history of cinema, if not the history of creation of the arts. So like I loved diving into the fan service moments, and there were moments that I left on the cutting room floor because I was worried like, maybe this is too navel gazing, this goes too far. But like when I took it on tour, then I was like, oh fuck, like there were so many I missed. Like if I realized that like you're gonna sit here and watch it every night, and the people who are watching it with you are people who grew up watching these other movies. So like, I tell you, Greg, I lose sleep every night. Never fucking I think about how I had Diedrich fucking Bader in that outfit on my set. I didn't just say like, hey man, just give us what a lovely tea party, like before I let him go. I had that in the movie. Every night of that tour, we literally would have brought the fucking house down with just that fucking line. It was that easy, man. Like, yeah. And it's not like the movie was like built of all that and shit, but to have those fan service, like fucking applause moments where people like they would see Diedrich Bader from behind when we do the reveal shot before we even see his face. The crowd would be like, yes. And we didn't even do anything all that great with him. And thankfully, instantly hand off to Ben Affleck so that people forget that we didn't necessarily do anything all that great with Diedrich other than bring him back.
So, you had him interact with Steve Coogan, so there you go.
With Keith. Oh, the Keith Coogan moment that was one of those satisfying things for me too. I saw Keith when I was on the set of the Goldbergs. I was directing the Goldbergs and shit. He was at the Sony lot. He pointed to the building at the end of the block, and it had his grandfather's name on it, Jackie Coogan. his grandfather is the one that got the laws changed for kids and entertainment. Jackie Coogan was one of the Little Rascals, one of the R Gang, and his parents took all his money and shit. He's a guy who played Perry White in the Superman movie Dick Donner did.
No shit. Okay.
That's Jackie Coogan. So when he was, no, right? No, my bad. Jackie Coogan is Uncle Fester. Fuck. Do you got your?
I got Wikipedia. Hold on, I'll find it for you. You keep talking.
Oh, Jackie Coogan was one. I know he's one of the Little Rascals. He also worked as an adult.
He was definitely a little rascal. It's loading up here. He was in Charlie Chan stuff too, or Charlie Chaplin stuff. Whole bunch of that.
He was the kid, I think, in The Kid. Did he grow up to be Uncle Fester? Am I crazy?
Oh wait, hold on. Yeah, well, we got an Addams Family. Yeah, he was Uncle Fester. You're right. 1973. He's Uncle Fester.
So he was a young little rascal, and then he grew up to be Uncle Fester. But his parents took all his rascal money, and he had nothing. So like when he turned 18 or whatever, they were like, "It's gone. We spent that." They changed the law. There's a law called the Coogan Law, which when a child works on a production, a percentage goes right into this Coogan account that no parent can touch. It's a pretty high percentage, so that nothing like that would ever happen again, where no parent could just take all their kids' money. So. Sure, yeah. Building there, the Jackie Coogan, like where the kids went to school and shit, like back in the day. So we were talking about it. I was like, hey man, he said, what are you doing next? I'm doing Jay and Silent Bob reboot in a couple months. I said, we're shooting in Louisiana. He said, I'm going to be out in Florida doing a con. I said, then you please, on your way home, stop by and come be in the movie. And he was like, all right. And so I think he thought he'd pop up in the flick, like, and move on and shit. The whole movie, I built like 3 fucking major Coogan jokes into the movie. So much so that like some people who saw Reboot were like, I don't remember. Was he in one of your other movies? I go so deep and hard on Keith Coogan because I was like, and Mosier always loved that fucking trailer, man. For Don't Tell My Babysitter Said. He's like, the dishes are done, man. So like I was like, oh my God. Like, and also he and Jay are like not that far removed from Keith Coogan. You know what I'm saying? Like we had a moment in movies when we were younger and shit where people are like, oh, I know those guys. And I love it whenever somebody puts Jay in something. Like I can always manufacture my own work. I always keep my face out there and shit. I'll never let anybody forget about fucking Kevin Smith. Like to be able to like bring somebody in and who don't get as frequent a job. That's what I want for myself. That's what I want from my boy as well. So like when I see somebody who's like, motherfucker's been in movies, legit, like they built a marketing campaign on him going, the dishes are done, man. Least I could do is like invite him into my dippy shit. It's like, what am I making? All the President's Men? I'm making a Jay and Silent Bob sequel. So it's like, if you're near us, come on. Once I had him though, I was like, I'm going to blow his fucking mind. So when he did his scene, but he didn't know all the other references to him throughout the movie. Him and Pinky, his wife, were 2 of the first people that came over to my house. I said, come over to my house and I'll show you the whole cut of the movie, man, my first cut. They were literally my test screening audience. I sat in the back, listened to all their reactions, made cuts based on their reactions alone and shit.
Wow.
They had no idea how many times he was going to be referenced. Every time somebody brought up Keith Coogan in the movie, including at one point, Chris Hemsworth fucking goes, the dishes are done, man. Like, watch both him and his lady go like, what the fuck? Like, like they were in a Twilight Zone episode. Like, why is this happening? It was one of the most fulfilling moments of 2019 for me. It was just really, really cool. People deserve their propers, man. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's one weird small way. He was a fan. He would go to like Babylon shows and whatnot. And whenever I saw him, we would chit chat. So I was like, oh my God, fucking play. I loved every night listen to people like react to him and shit. And then it killed me whenever people was just like, is he in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back? No. I remember on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back when Jason Lee and Jay Muse and the comic book store scene going, that thing. Yeah. Like people were always like, what is that a reference to? And I'm like, nothing. Some shit in my movies ain't a reference. It's a thing happening for the first time. We will reference it later on, but sometimes you got to.
Now it's a reference. Once it happens, it's a reference. Yeah. So, final question, because you got things to do. Mike, is this, and it's stick with me. You said earlier that you're fine making Kevin Smith movies for Kevin Smith fans, right? And I think you just talked about the Reboot Roadshow and going there night after night, city after city, sold out fucking houses, people going crazy, let alone, and I don't remember this, I don't have the stats in front of me. We talked about on the show that like on a per capita screen ratio, like it fucking dominated for the year.
Some cool little records and stuff. Sold over the course of the tour 65,000 tickets. So we did 67 cities in 3 countries. Well, that doesn't count. For the American tour, it's 65 cities across 4 months and sold 65,000 tickets. So yeah, we were like 1,000 a night. Some nights were 500 and some nights were 1,500. It was generally average 1,000 a night. Something I don't think I'll fucking see again until they come up with a vaccine. You think they're ever going to put 1,000 people in a theater again? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it'll definitely be a long time. But seeing that and feeling that and knowing you're making movies for Kevin Smith fans, when in the filmology do you think that's crystallized for you? Because I have to imagine at some point it is, I'm making movies. Clerks is this huge indie success. You go with Mallrats, you're trying to make Porky's. That doesn't work out that way. You make Chasing, and you're at some
a smart Porky's. That's what we were trying to. you do there. You've not seen Porky's in a few years. Porky's is a smart Porky's. Like, I don't know. That was Jim Jackson's pitch on Mallrats. It's like, we're making a smart Porky's. But Porky's was actually fairly smart and a lot more profitable. So he should have said, we're making a non-profitable Porky's. That would have made more sense.
Accurate, yeah. But so do you understand, where do you start to understand that it's like, fuck it, it's not about reviews, box office's mainline success? Because even this one where we went through this and did view, skew, and review, and it was my first time watching everything ever, I guess. Because even like, leading up to leading up to Strikes Back, that would have been at the height of my fandom when we're watching we're watching movies weekend after weekend or whatever and just killing time and it's on like background noise. But to get here, watch all that, and me and Kevin be like, oh, well, there was this, and Kevin's much younger than me, so even me being like, well, Clerks was about your first job, and like, no, I remember Chasing Amy resonated because it was weird to date someone and their sexual experiences versus yours, and how does all these different touchstones you find in it. And then of course I wanted the fandom, and I bought the blueprint, and I wanted, like, when does it strike to you that like, wait a second, fuck mainstream Hollywood, it doesn't need to be that way. It's, if I'm making movies that are successful with my people, that's good enough.
Technically Clerks too. And I realize it in post when I'm cutting the prison scene together. And that's the scene where Dante and Randall have this kind of like showdown where Randall finally bears his soul. Like the king of all cynicism finally puts his heart on his sleeve, where he's like, I'd buy the Quick Stop and reopen it myself. That was definitely a moment where it started eating, where I was like, oh, then what happens right after Zach and Miri make a porno? I had kind of like, oh my God, like we thought it was going to make 100 million and it wound up doing a standard Kevin Smith 30 million. Then after that, I go do Cop Out.
Yeah.
And then, we all know what happened with Cop Out. Which like, I don't want to, it's not me toot my own horn because I didn't write the script, like, and I had a lot of help making the movie, a lot of very talented people. I just rewatched it like during quarantine. That shit made me laugh. There was some shit in that movie that actually made me laugh. Like Tracy Morgan is legit brilliant in that movie. It had nothing to do with me. He's just a funny fucking dude. So, it's probably right around Red State because that follows Cop Out. Then I turn off for 3 years. Like after I make Red State, I don't make a film, and I'm like, I'm retired. Now all I'm going to do is podcast. Over that time, like it was 3 years of not making films. And then because of a conversation we had on a podcast, I was like, oh, I would like to see this as a movie, and Tusk comes to life. So it's got to be like, the idea starts occurring to me on Clerks too, because I remember being very emotional in the editing room when I was like, I think I'm trying to tell myself something. It was the podcasting was kind of the bedrock of understanding, like, look, you could talk to people in another way. It doesn't have to be this one thing, this one expensive thing. Mm-hmm. And by the time I get to Tusk, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, because Tusk was the one to me that is so similar to Clerks, even though they don't look a thing alike and shit. But Tusk is a spiritual sequel to Clerks. The only two movies I made up until that point, I just like did not give a fuck about what the outcome would be, what people's reaction would be. Didn't think about box office. Wasn't like, what will critics say? Clerks, when I made that, I was just hoping it would get bought. Tusk, when I made it, I was just hoping we finished because every step of it was like unlikely. We were making this unlikely movie. And the spirit of both, by which both were made, was I just want to see this fucking thing. It was masturbatory. It was very selfish. It was like, I just want to see what it would look like. It wasn't like, oh, I want to see what it would look like, plus I wonder what the critics will think, or plus I want it to do 30 million at the box office, or plus. This was just like, I just have to see it come to life. Definitely by Tusk, which was good because then the next movie is Yoga Hosers and everybody fucking hated that. But Reboot, was kind of like, I guess everyone got like kind of tired of hating on me, or they were like, look, you finally made a movie we fucking agree with again. And Reboot seems to have like brought a lot of people back. Probably has a lot to do with the fact that like, it's predicated on the old stuff. And, I would talk about on tour that like, I was like, I know Reboot. You've just watched Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. And I said, next up, we're going to be doing Mallrats sequel and a Clerks sequel. And I'm sure some people out there would be like, none of that sounds very original. And I would very quickly point out that a few years ago, I got frighteningly original with a Walrus movie. And everybody was very quickly like, go back to the old fucking movies. So we're going to be in old movie country for a little while, man, which has been fun for me. Here, let me ask you, man, as a fan, because you do go back to the early years. If you had a chance, which title would you prefer? Highlight of the Mallrats or Mallrats 2 TOO? Not the 2 number, but TOO.
Sure.
Which pays more? You don't have to come up with
No. Please. I'm a podcaster like yourself. I can answer anything at any time.
Greg.
I think Twilight of the Mallrats speaks more, at least, to what I think you're going with it, right? Of like this, like, okay, the sun's getting pretty low, big guy. Like, what are we doing? Like, that speaks to me on what it's going to be.
Pretty low, big guy. Oh my God, you just weeded me.
Yeah, just right.
Just so age on to me, man. Holy shit. Yeah. It does smack of. There's sense of an ending here. You know what I'm saying? Especially, in which echoes on a couple different levels, and as much as like the retail experience is changing as we know it, and has been for a long time prior to COVID and stuff. The story-wise, Brody's story, Brody is a man kind of out of time, although oddly in time at the same time. Like the world aged well around Brody, just like me. Like I was waving the flag for fucking comic books and had Stan Lee and Mallrats in 1995, and then the world grew up to be that world where people are like, where's Stan in the latest Marvel movie? So just like Brody, or just more to the point, just like me, Brody's coasting on laurels by the skin of his teeth, just like, oh, shit worked out. I'm still here. You know what I'm saying? So I am like, I'm completely self-aware, and I'd like to think that I have more to say than like Brody does. But I also recognize that like my primary business in this business of show is the past. It's no longer the present. Everything I do is predicated on the past. Even like Masters of the Universe, a new story, was predicated on the past. Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, we went and did great business, predicated on the past. My next 2 projects, predicated on the past. Like, I'm okay with that right now because we seem to live in an era where everyone would much rather retreat to the past than kind of live in the present. And that was before things started exploding lately. That was just based on who was in the Oval Office and stuff.
Well, I can't interject. Like, I don't think it's so much for me as a fan, right? For me as a fan, it's not about living in the past and seeing those moments again. And I think Clerks 2 is the best example of it, where Clerks 2, I remember seeing, I didn't even, for some reason, I don't think it was any reflection on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but I was a different place. I think I was working my first job post-college, and I didn't get around till it was on DVD. And I remember watching it and enjoying it, but I never went back and watched it again. Like, it was until we did in review. And when we were watching in review and we got to the end and we sat down at the table to talk about it, obviously opinions varied across the way. But for me, what I didn't like about it was what I felt was Dante and Randall spinning their wheels so much and still being exactly the same for most of it. And then we get to the jailhouse scene. And what I said and at the table was, this is where I wish the movie would have started. I wish this would have been the crescendo of like the first act of like, no, man, I love you and we're best friends. And that's why I'm an asshole sometimes. And we should do this. And we start off on this journey to see them take that step forward. And I think for Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, a movie I enjoy, but again, wasn't like my favorites of the other things. I think, because I do think that I remember on the press for that, and when we were talking about stuff for that back in the day, and when I say I mean you on the message boards, we're talking to me very personally on these message boards for View Askew. We're talking about it being, these guys are dick and fart jokes. And I thought that like that got in your head and made the movie a dick and fart joke, which is funny, but not something I want to come back to the way I wanted to come back to all the movies before it. So to get to reboot, right, and have it be that, no, like, here they are, and they are growing up, and they already have in a lot of ways, but they are about to have this journey and introduce, Millennium and how we're going to go on that and do that. That's what it's about. So again, to the title, Twilight of the Mallrats gets me excited because it makes me think from the get-go, we're going to be dealing with Brody's shit of like, here's what's happening and what we're talking about. Right. And it's the same reason of like, when I heard the pitch for Clerks 3, that the Clerks 3 that's going to happen, Dante's going to have the heart attack. Right. And he's going to want to make a movie. I was like, oh my God, that's fucking brilliant.
Randall has the heart attack.
Oh, fuck, sorry.
This is this movie is very guy least likely almost dies and changes everything. That has to be Randall. You know what I'm saying? Like, if Dante does it, then people are like, boy, you're not even trying anymore. Why don't you just call the character Kevin and fucking be done with it? So with Randall, it presented a better opportunity for the story to have Randall be the heart attack victim, because this is a guy who's just like, number one, he's constantly pent up rage. Like, so that's a dude who's more prone to it and stuff. And number two, he's the guy who could benefit the most from growth, from change. Like, even though at the end of Clerks 2, like, they're the masters of their own, destiny and stuff, always a two-sided coin. Like, I'm happy that I have my audience. Then somebody outside the situation will be like, and he's trapped by that audience. And because of that audience, he'll never be anything or whatever like that. That's the ending of Clerks 2. It's like, they got exactly what they wanted, and they're better for it. You have to be careful what you wish for, because now they're just back at the same fucking place where these movies. So, it's weird. I never thought about like starting the movie like that would be the third act of Clerks 2. For me, it was, they have to, seeing the story of one guy trying to do the same thing. One guy who's like, I'm done doing the same thing. I'm going someplace else. This dude struggling to hold on to the past while this dude is reaching for the future. That's kind of what defines a relationship at that point in Clerks 2. And then in Clerks 3, it flips, oddly enough. Flips back, so to speak.
Sure.
It's I don't know. It's weird. Like, if you're lucky, you live long enough to be able to tell fucking weird layered stories with characters that you never imagined you'd play with more than once or something. If you're really lucky, you build your own universe where that's kind of possible, where everybody knew each other else, and you fucking put them all together just because it amused you and shit. But now, years later, that's actually where the entire business has gone. And if you're lucky, you kind of get second bites at the apple. Like, I love Mallrats, and I certainly love what Mallrats has become. In the moment when we made Mallrats, I loved it. When Mallrats came out and everyone hated it, I was like, yeah, fuck it. And then everyone fell in love with it, and suddenly I was like, hey, we were right after all, and stuff like that. So, like, there's it's a weird, like, as much as like we made Mallrats, then somebody dropped Mallrats, and then we put it back together, and people still like it. You know, there's a certain sense of like, well, then fucking leave it alone. Why would you tempt fate? But like at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but we didn't know when we made Mallrats that it would become Mallrats. That like this is a movie that like it was disposable when we made it. It's aged insanely well, and now has afforded me an opportunity to tell a story with these characters one more time. Like I just want to do it. You know, you remember the Time Life series of books? I don't know if you remember those from TV, where they would do Old West and shit like that. And the one guy was like, this fucker who killed a man, you know, just for snoring and shit like that. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to, now I want to make a Mallrats sequel just to watch, you know, like some people's expression change, just to tell the story that I want to tell. But also because like, fucking unlikely. It's crazy. Like, you know, that was a movie that died when it came out. Be able to like have a second bite at the apple and be like, okay, now everything I know over 25 years since I made the first Mallrats, I can bring to bear and to make another version of Mallrats. That's like fucking mind bending. And then when you step back even further, outside the situation, most people would be like, why not just spend your creative energy on something brand new? And I'm like, I think we did. We just did it playing with my old toys, and I've been doing that my whole fucking career. You know what I'm saying? So
that's, I think, when you're the best, when you're the best at, when you're at the top of your game, when you're making your movies, is when you have something personal to say and you're evolving your characters, and that's 100%. Like, so if that's what it's going to be, right?
I think Twilight of the Mallrats, A, is going to work, but B, I think you're right. I think that is the title. I like the title because it sounds so fucking metal. Can you see? It's a poster for that movie. Like, think of the poster for Mallrats that Drew Struzan did. We do something called Twilight of the fucking Mallrats. That poster is going to look so rad, man. Post-apocalyptic and shit like that. It's going to look Mad Maxy, Road Warrior, that kind of thing. But it is kind of dope title. There's a part of me that's just like, well, because the other day on Instagram I put up Mallrats 2, TOO, like because it was me and Ethan Suplee. And somebody in the comments was like, there's your fucking title. And I was like, oh my God, they're right. It would be perfect as well, because there's a whole generation, a second generation of fucking kids in the show that are Mallrats too. So it would work. But I think then alphabetically, if you've got it in your DVD collection, and not like anybody, you know, most people are streaming, but some people still have a DVD collection. The sequel to Mallrats, if it was Mallrats 2, would be right next to it. Twilight of the Mallrats is all the way down in fucking the T's, and for the anal retentive people like myself, that's the only tripping block where I'm like, yeah, but do I
DVDs, and I had all my movies there. The Kevin Smith ones were there, organized by release, because there was a universe, there was a timeline. That's why I ordered them that way. And I wonder how many people with like MCU do the same thing rather than
right? If I mean, I've got the big Avengers box set. But what would you do if you were shelving each of the Marvel movies? You'd probably do them time.
I think so,
because that's how you have to watch them in order to get everything. Yeah. He just fucking shot a geek load, man.
That's what We Have Cool Friends is all about, everybody. Your show on youtube.com/kindoffunnypodcast.
I know we're breaking up, or I'm not breaking up, ending up, but how
literally breaking it off, because I think you have stuff to do. If you have shit to do, we can hang out all day.
How has the creator owned been for, like, looking back now, do you regret not doing it sooner? Or
no, like
doing it
no, first off, the creator owned life has been amazing for all of us. You know what I mean? Like, this is Kind of Funny is a dream every day. IGN was great too, and we love that too. But like, owning your destiny, right? And having it be your friends and you're coming together making this, and that, you know, we're to the point now that we've been there for a while, but I think of the most recent hire being Blessing Adeoye Jr., who was a fan and is our first like full-time games hire. And he's hosting the shows that I you know, pioneered or whatever. And people aren't missing me when I'm not on them, and he's on them and stuff like that. Like, paying it forward, that's so huge. But in terms of like, do we wish we did it sooner or not at all? Like, definitely we're glad we did it. And I think we did it at the perfect time somehow. You know what I mean? The story I always tell is that when I decided to do YouTube, I remember going to VidCon and learning about it, and then, you know, hanging out with iJustine or Phil DeFranco or whatever, and seeing their millions of subs. And I remember being like, I'm so late to this game. And I remember, talking about coming to Twitter, and I came there late, and it took so long to get verified and earn point or followers and stuff. And I was like, I'm so late to this game. Like, we got to be the pioneers for Patreon and for breaking off from a big thing and showing you could do your own thing in this space. And granted, technically, like, Jim Sterling did a little bit before us, but we were the big success story. And so, no, it's been since we started, this has been above and beyond our expectations. But we still go back all the time, because when we recorded with you in LA, right, it was before we actually publicly launched, so we didn't know what we were getting into. And the amount of times we look at each other and we'll be that thing of, remember, you wanted this. You told us that from this day forward. Remember, you wanted it. You had the path of least resistance, had a job and a 401k. You chose this, and like, there's the good days where me and Tim look at each other and like, remember, you wanted this. And there's the days where it's like, we need an adult and we're the adults, so let's figure out what we're going to do. And it's, you wanted this.
It's crazy, man. You're right. You're captain of your own ships. You're captains of your own ships. So, when it soars, when the wind is blowing in the sails, you're making distance. You're like, I'm so smart. And then when there's no wind and the ship is sitting still, you're like, I'm still smart. I can't control the wind.
It becomes inner image, right? Of like, am I wrong? No, it's the children. They're the ones who are wrong.
All right, man.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for giving us some time today.
Goddamn pleasure. Thanks for having and stuff. One plug. I've got a TBS. I'm on a TBS show called Celebrity Show Off, which is we just put up the video for it. The idea is like, nobody can leave their house, so here's some packages. Shoot a show in your house. And TBS puts it up on YouTube, and then based on votes, you get voted off the show. It's like a competition thing, and then it's for charity. So the show airs next week. They just put up my little segment. You could do anything you want, but most people chose 2 camera shows, like people talking to camera, hosting a thing. I was like, fuck it, let's shoot a sitcom. So I wrote a little sitcom called Son in Lockdown, because my daughter's boyfriend came to live with us when the quarantine began. So it's on YouTube right now. They can totally click on it and watch it. And I act, not silent, like lots of words. Yes, I overact. It is worth watching just for the fucking facial expressions of it all, like the hammy face work will remind you why Silent Bob was the role that I was born to play.
I'm making a note. I'm putting a link in the description of this YouTube video, so everyone can go over there, leave a kind of funny in the comments, let them know we sent you. And also, before we let you go, one thing to point out too, I can't, and this is going to sound really offensive, I guess, but it's not. I can't get over how good Harley is in Reboot. Like, I thought she crushed.
I think she did a wonderful job. I mean, look, as her dad, I was like, I'm so proud of you. But as the director, I was like, holy fuck, because I had no plan. I'd written the character, but like, I remember telling her before we went to shoot, I was like, you should maybe start watching Jay. And she's like, why? I was like, because like you're playing his kid in the movie. She's like, I've grown up around him. I don't think I've fucking studied this guy. And she's like, I'm an awful guy. And she's like, my inner life. And I was like, all right, calm down, Meryl. So she'd been training. She did like Method. Stella Adler, was that what it was?
I think so.
And she's like, the last time I worked with her was like Yoga Hosers and maybe Hollow Ian short we shot. And then, so when I come back on set, like, she had been in Quentin's movie. She'd done Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep.
So she walked onto our set with a certain swagger to her. Like, I just came
doing
a fucking set. Yeah, kind of thing. So it was nice. I was happy for her. I was way happier for us because her performance brought out even better performance from Jay, because when Harley like starts tearing up, and she's good at just like, she could turn it on, it affected Jay, because Jay was like, he didn't, he wasn't in the moment. He was just like, I'm looking at this girl I've known my whole life fucking suddenly cry, and started bringing it out in him. And I was like, oh my God. I said, you did something I could never do in all the years I was directing that guy. You pulled an emotional performance out of him. And she was like, well, I did work with Quentin Tarantino. So I'm so happy for her. She's off on her own. She, like most actors who I've worked with, like, she's willing to still work with me, but you can tell that she wants better things, it's like Affleck joked with me like about her because no, he fucking loved Reboot, but he loved her in Reboot. He's like, your daughter's like a legit good actress, man. Like, why are you holding her back with Kevin Smith movie? And I said, like, I reached out to the kid about being in like Mallrats and Twilight of the Mallrats, and she was like, when we get closer, just tell me if there's anything still open. And Ben goes like, she learned early to say no to a Kevin Smith picture. He goes, I wish I had learned at that young age how to be one and done. But yeah, I'm happy for her. Thank you for that. It's very sweet.
No problem. Yeah, when she was crying in the back of the van in the movie, and I looked over, and my wife was crying. That's when I was like, we got something here.
Yeah. I too was just like, ooh, I was like very greedy because I'm like, she might be able to support herself. Like she may be able to do this professionally. Good for her.
All right, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Excellent talking to you, man. Say hi to everybody.
Will do. Always a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this episode of We Have Cool Friends. Remember, you can get We Have Cool Friends on patreon.com/kindoffunny, ad-free. You can ask your questions. Sorry, we ran out of time today to do them. You can watch the show, of course, for free on youtube.com/kindoffunny. Has ads, though. You can also get it as a podcast on podcast services around the globe. We Have Cool Friends, of course, is usually on Mondays, but it's a regularly scheduled programming. Next week, we are actually back on Tuesday with, let me check my notes here, Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge and the comedy buttons, Scott Bromley. That's right. Bromley is finally coming to We Have Cool Friends. That is going to be next Tuesday, wherever you get your YouTube videos, which I guess is on YouTube at youtube.com/kindoffunny, and podcast services around the globe. Until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.